Lily Tang once had a deeply cherished secret love. When her secret love turned into a mutual affection, her heart overflowed with emotions, making her even more cautious and appreciative of this relationship. So, when John Fu proposed marriage, she agreed without a second thought. Their wedding was held by the seaside. Lily, with a face full of happiness, walked towards her groom, John. Together, they stood on the steps where the vows were to be exchanged, and the priest was about to begin his speech. Suddenly, a man in a suit appeared on the steps, which originally had only 3 people.
Mr. Fu will call for you.
John wasn't upset by the interruption from his assistant. He had already instructed him that any call from Emily Xiao must be brought to his attention, no matter the circumstances. As soon as he answered with Emily, a woman's desperate cries came through the receiver.
John, help me, please. Michael's song is hurting me. Please, come save me, John.
Emily's voice was heart-wrenching, and Lily, standing beside John, heard every word clearly. She stared blankly at John's handsome face. The groom's usual indifferent expression was replaced by visible anxiety, something Lily had never seen before. Her mind buzzed, and she felt a sudden panic. As if sensing what was about to happen, she grabbed John's arm tightly just as he was about to step away. John's gaze shifted from her hand to her face.
John, don't go.
Her voice was small and weak, filled with a desperate plea.
If I don't go, will I just watch Emily suffer?
Call the police to help Emily. They will get there faster than you. Today is our wedding day. You can't leave me. Please, don't leave me.
Lily's eyes were already red, her pitiful appearance enough to evoke sympathy from anyone. But John was not just anyone, and he had no extra compassion to spare. His feelings were entirely devoted to Emily. He simply said,
She can't be without me.
With that, he shook off Lily's hand. The call was still ongoing, and Emily's cries for help grew weaker. John resolutely abandoned his bride and left, ignoring the gasps from the guests. Lily ignored the mocking glances and laughter from the guests, stumbling as she ran, her eyes red and shouting,
John, don't go!
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call? She cried, her eyes red, chasing after John's tall figure. Her high heels had long been kicked off during the run, and the gravel on the ground hurt her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, and he had to go. As the car started, he saw a white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror, feeling a slight irritation. He pressed the gas pedal harder. The car sped up, and in her current state, she couldn't catch up with a person, let alone a speeding car. But she really didn't want him to leave. A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of the white figure startled the driver, followed by the screeching sound of brakes. Blood quickly spread around, staining the white wedding dress into a crimson flower. Narrator, tone, sad Emily cried, her eyes red, chasing after John's tall figure. Her high heels had long been discarded during the run, and the gravel on the ground hurt her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart.
John, please don't leave. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, and he had to go. As the car started, he saw a white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror, feeling a slight irritation.
John Fu, tone, serious, I'm sorry, Emily. I have to go.
He pressed the gas pedal harder. The car sped up, and in her current state, she couldn't catch up with a person, let alone a speeding car. But she really didn't want him to leave. A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of the white figure startled the driver, followed by the screeching sound of brakes. Blood quickly spread around, staining the white wedding dress into a crimson flower. Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
John, please, don't go.
Emily's eyes were red as she chased after John's tall figure. She had kicked off her high heels during the run, and the gravel on the ground hurt her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, and he had to go. As the car started, he saw a white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror. Feeling a slight irritation, he pressed the gas pedal harder.
I'm sorry, Emily. I have to.
The car sped up, and in her current state, she couldn't catch up. But she really didn't want him to leave.
A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of the white figure startled the driver, followed by the screeching sound of brakes. Blood quickly spread around, staining the white wedding dress into a crimson flower.
Lily Tang, John Fu was always supposed to be mine. You are the intruder.
With a slap, Lily Tang struck her across the face. She was furious at Emily Zhao's words. Emily had abandoned John Fu to marry someone else, breaking his heart. How could she say such things? It was too much. John Fu rushed to the hospital after receiving Emily Zhao's call, but as soon as he reached the door, he heard the crisp sound of a slap. Pushing the door open, he saw a red handprint on Emily Zhao's face.
Lily Tang, what right do you have to hit her?
John Fu.
Lily Tang was slapped back by John Fu, the blow making her head buzz and her cheek ache. After hitting her, he took Emily Zhao's hand and left. Lily Tang was left sitting on the bed in disarray, watching the two of them leave together. She touched her cheek, the tears making the sting even worse.
John Fu, I only care about you, care so much that I hit her. Why can't you understand?
She was downcast all day, unable to focus on her books. After eating the meal brought by the caregiver, she lay down and fell asleep. In the dim room, no one would know that she had cried herself to sleep not long ago. Her sleep was restless, always hovering between dreams and wakefulness. So when she felt a slight change, she quickly woke up. Her first instinct was to cry out for help, but her mouth was covered, stifling her voice. But soon she recognized the familiar presence. It was John Fu.
John Fu, stop, she said, trying to halt his rough actions, but he quickly restrained her.
Stop what? Lily Tang, isn't this what you wanted? He said, biting her harshly, ignoring her cries of pain, his grip growing stronger.
What is wrong with you?
What's wrong with me? You ask what's wrong with me? Haven't I treated you well? Why did you provoke Emily Xiao? What did she ever do to you?
So, in the end, his erratic behavior was still because of Emily Xiao?
I didn't provoke her. Let go, she said, clearly unhappy with the situation.
You don't get a say in this.
He was extremely upset today because he had seen something he didn't want to see, Emily Xiao and Michael Song walking arm in arm in front of him. Emily had even been very affectionate with Michael right in front of him, showing off their love, which made him incredibly jealous and hateful. He knew Emily Xiao was doing it on purpose to anger him, and she had succeeded. But he was helpless, unable to do anything about it. So he took all his anger and hatred out on Lily Tang. That was her purpose, wasn't it? Days passed uneventfully. Emily Xiao no longer came to the hospital to stir up trouble, but John Fu's visits became increasingly rare. Finally, the day Lily Tang was to be discharged arrived, but John Fu didn't show up, only sending his assistant to pick her up.
I won't be discouraged. I'll make John fall in love with me. Emily Xiao is just a part of his past.
Lily continued to bring homemade food to John every day, knowing his favorite flavors and catering to his tastes. Although John never commented, he always finished the food.
He finishes everything I make. That's a good sign, right?
Emily Xiao hadn't appeared again, which Lily found very reassuring. Only this way could she hope to drive Emily out of John's heart and place herself in it. These days, Lily needed to go to the hospital for a follow-up check, and the assistant had already made an appointment with the doctor. Sitting outside the consultation room with a complex expression, Lily held a report that felt like a bolt from the blue. She was pregnant.
Pregnant? How could this be?
Her heart pounded fiercely, unable to calm down. John Fu's cold face flashed through her mind. He had said he didn't like children. She didn't know how long she sat there before her heart finally calmed. With nervous anticipation, she returned to the apartment John had arranged for her. It was more of an occasional stop for him than a home. She sent a message to John, asking him to come back today as she had something very important to tell him. In the kitchen, she prepared dinner, thinking of many ways to phrase her words, imagining John's reaction when he found out. Lost in thought, she heard a noise at the door and guessed that John had returned. She rushed to the door and indeed saw him standing there, lowering his head to unlock the door.
What's making you so happy?
To Lily, his words sounded like concern.
You must be hungry. Let's eat first.
She reheated the dishes and ate with John, frequently stealing glances at him while serving food.
What do you want to say?
Lily's heart raced. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes tightly.
John, I'm pregnant.
The room fell silent. John's gaze darkened, his eyes sharp.
I see.
Lily was stunned. She opened her eyes, staring blankly at John's stern features.
John, this is our child, our first child, and a new life. How can you say no without even thinking?
Lily, I told you before I don't like children. It's my fault you got unexpectedly pregnant, but the child cannot stay.
What reason do you have to insist on not keeping this child?
You don't want to know.
John, I want to know.
Emily won't like it.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
She cried, her eyes red, chasing after John's tall figure. Her high heels had long been kicked off during the run, and the gravel on the ground hurt her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, and he had to go. As the car started, he saw a white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror, feeling a slight irritation. He pressed the gas pedal harder.
The car sped up, and in her current state, she couldn't catch up with a person, let alone a speeding car. But she really didn't want him to leave.
A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of the white figure startled the driver, followed by the screeching sound of brakes. Blood quickly spread around, staining the white wedding dress into a crimson flower.
Lily Tang felt a sweetness in her heart as she saw John Fu to the door. Before he entered the elevator, she loudly said, "Thank you, John."
Thank you for agreeing to keep this child. Thank you for considering me for once.
John Fu paused at the sound of her joyful voice, suppressing his inner irritation as he entered the elevator. After John Fu left, she closed the door, feeling extremely excited. She could keep this child, and her bad mood was swept away. With a good mood, her appetite naturally improved. She insisted on buying groceries and cooking at home, avoiding outside food, and taking her medication on time, just waiting for a checkup at the hospital in a week.
But she didn't have to wait a week. On the third day after taking the medication, she felt something was clearly wrong.
Oh no, what's happening?
Her lower abdomen suddenly hurt intensely, so much that she couldn't stand. She collapsed, supporting herself with trembling arms, trying to get up from the floor, but she couldn't muster the strength. It hurt too much, a pain that penetrated to the bone.
Please, no!
A warm flow slowly slid down her thigh, and she clearly felt something was leaving her body. Fear instantly invaded her mind as she looked at the ground in horror, a large pool of crimson blood deeply stinging her.
No, no.
She screamed in terror, her nerves almost breaking, as if falling into a deep abyss of despair, staring incredulously at the red pool. She was going mad. She was sent to the emergency room again. When Lily Tang regained consciousness, the painful memories overwhelmed her, almost crushing her.
Miss Tang, how are you feeling now?
An assistant came in with a packed meal.
What are you doing here?
The boss instructed.
Instructed you to see if my child is gone?
The assistant was at a loss for words. She turned her back to the assistant, leaving only a slender silhouette. The assistant sighed and went out to call John Fu, describing Lily Tang's condition in a more tragic light, possibly out of guilt. John Fu frowned slightly after hearing it. He couldn't focus on his documents, tossing them on the desk as he got up and left the company. The smell of disinfectant in the hospital made him feel irritable again, especially when he saw the frail Lily Tang. This feeling only intensified. In just a few days, this woman seemed to have changed completely. Her small face was pale, her clear eyes were swollen and lifeless, and she exuded a sense of desolation. Those unaware might think she had some incurable disease.
I heard you're planning to go on a hunger strike?
Do you even care if I eat?
Of course, aren't you my woman?
I used to be happy hearing that, but now, it just feels fake. You're too hypocritical, John Fu.
John Fu found it amusing yet infuriating.
Just because I asked you to end a pregnancy, you think I'm hypocritical? It's not like you can't have children anymore.
But it was your child, your own flesh and blood.
I don't need it.
What you need is Emily Xiao, right?
John Fu looked at her expressionlessly for a moment before saying,
You know it well.
What if I don't want to anymore? What if I want to end this relationship with you?
After asking, Lily Tang realized her heart was pounding. She was both hopeful and afraid, hoping John Fu would respond, but fearing he would say, then let's end it. But it was neither.
You wouldn't refuse, would you? You love me. He smiled faintly. Lily Tang, you haven't lost anything. Just being by my side makes you happy, doesn't it?
John Fu once again trampled on her heart. Her dignity felt stripped away, leaving her exposed and forced to endure the humiliation from the person she liked.
Her fingers dug into her flesh as she gritted her teeth and said, You're right, John Fu. I'm pathetic for loving you.
Her love for John Fu had seeped into her bones and blood over the past 10 years, taking root in her heart. It had become a habit, a belief. This feeling had sustained Lily Tang throughout her youth. She had witnessed John Fu and Emily Xiao together, and then Emily Xiao abandoning John Fu to get married. She had felt jealousy, felt that John Fu deserved better, and even felt a secret joy. When she finally stood by this man, everything changed. She longed for John Fu's love, hated Emily Xiao, and had tried hard to win his affection, but felt increasingly powerless. Like now. They were attending a party hosted by a wealthy businessman in the city, and unsurprisingly, they ran into Emily Xiao and her husband, Michael Song. In many ways, Michael Song was a good man, but he still fell short compared to John Fu. This was Lily Tang's first appearance in a social setting since the failed wedding. She knew many people just wanted to see her make a fool of herself, thinking she didn't deserve John Fu. She had long been used to it. Lost in thought, a hand reached around her waist, pulling her into John Fu's embrace. Just as she wondered what he was doing, she saw Emily Xiao walking over with Michael Song. Lily Tang's eyes dimmed. This sudden intimacy was just a facade. Whether it was to make Emily Xiao jealous or to pretend to be in love in front of others, she didn't want to delve into it. She was tired.
Michael Song clinked glasses with John Fu and said with a smile, "Mr. Fu, this is the first time you've brought your fiancée here, isn't it?"
Yes. John Fu's attitude was indifferent, his face expressionless.
"I heard Mr. Fu left suddenly at the last wedding. I wonder what could be more important than a wedding."
Emily Xiao lightly punched Michael Song's chest, teasingly saying, "Michael, this is their private matter. Why are you so nosy?"
Michael Song seemed to love Emily Xiao's playful demeanor, turning his head to kiss her passionately, not caring about the onlookers. A malicious glint flashed in Emily Xiao's eyes as she stared at John Fu's hand holding Lily Tang, as if she wanted to burn a hole through it. She hated seeing John Fu being intimate with someone else, and her pleasant facade was hard to maintain.
She composed herself, smiled, and said, "Mr. Fu and Miss Tang seem to have a great relationship, not forgetting to bring your fiancé even to social events."
She emphasized the last three words, as if afraid John Fu wouldn't hear.
John Fu raised an eyebrow. Mr. Song and Mrs. Song also seem to have a deep bond.
The words Mrs. Song from John Fu's mouth made Emily Xiao feel uncomfortable. She said,
"How can we compare? Mr. Fu has a young and beautiful fiancée like Miss Tang. You must be overjoyed."
Miss Xiao is right, I am indeed overjoyed.
John Fu decided to stop there and led Lily Tang away.
Lily Tang followed obediently, whispering, "So, is this why you want me by your side? To occasionally provoke Emily Xiao, make her regret, make her jealous?"
Yes. John Fu admitted frankly. That was his initial intention, though she had since served other purposes.
She held back her tears and asked, "Why me?"
Why?
John Fu couldn't answer that. She just happened to be there. But he wouldn't tell Lily Tang that. Instead, he raised an eyebrow and said, "You've loved me for 10 years. It's mutually beneficial, don't you think?"
Lily Tang felt a deep bitterness. "Yes, you're right."
Emily's voice trembled as she confronted John.
"Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?"
Tears streamed down her face as she chased after John, her high heels discarded in her desperate run. The gravel bit into her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart.
"I have to go, Emily. It's an emergency."
John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, but his duty pulled him away. As the car started, he saw Emily's white figure struggling to keep up in the rearview mirror. He accelerated, feeling a pang of irritation.
"John, please."
The car sped up, and Emily, in her current state, couldn't catch up. She didn't want him to leave, but she was powerless to stop him. A car approached, and her sudden appearance startled the driver. The screeching of brakes was followed by a sickening thud.
Blood spread quickly around her, turning her wedding dress into a crimson flower.
Emily's heart was racing as she watched John Fu's car speed away.
Shouting, "Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me on our wedding day? How can you leave because of a phone call?"
Tears streamed down her face as she chased after John's tall figure, her high heels discarded in the gravel. The pain in her feet was nothing compared to the agony in her heart.
"Serious, Emily, I have to go. This is important."
John never hung up the phone, knowing Emily needed him. But as his car started, he saw her chasing after him in the rearview mirror and felt a slight irritation.
Angry, why can't she understand?
He pressed the gas pedal harder, speeding away. Emily, in her disheveled state, couldn't possibly keep up.
A car approached, and the driver was startled by Emily's sudden appearance. The screeching of brakes was followed by a crimson stain spreading on her white wedding dress.
Emily's voice cracked as she pleaded with John.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
She ran after John, her bare feet bruised by the gravel, but the pain in her heart was far worse.
Emily, I have to go. This is important.
John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, but he had to leave. As the car started, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Emily chasing after him. He felt a slight irritation and pressed the gas pedal harder.
The car sped up, and Emily couldn't keep up. Desperation drove her forward, but it was futile.
John, please.
A car approached, and the driver, startled by Emily's sudden appearance, slammed on the brakes. The screeching was followed by a horrifying silence as blood pooled around Emily's white dress, staining it a deep crimson. Emily's voice trembled as she saw John walking away.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
She cried, her eyes red, chasing after John's tall figure. Her high heels had long been kicked off during the run, and the gravel on the ground hurt her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart.
I have to go, Emily. There's something I need to take care of.
John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, and he had to go. As the car started, he saw a white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror, feeling a slight irritation. He pressed the gas pedal harder.
John! Please, don't leave me!
The car sped up, and in her current state, she couldn't catch up with a person, let alone a speeding car. But she really didn't want him to leave.
A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of the white figure startled the driver, followed by the screeching sound of brakes. Blood quickly spread around, staining the white wedding dress into a crimson flower.
She finally understood everything, finally realized why Michael was unwilling to touch her. It wasn't because he had any physical issues, he was just using her.
Emily.
Emily met his gaze and couldn't help but run to his side. She just wanted to hold her man, no matter what.
John, it's all over. It's all over.
John was forced to accept her sudden embrace, his body stiffening for a moment before he quickly reached out to hold her, gently patting her back in silent comfort.
Stop crying. Let's leave here.
He pushed Emily away slightly, took her hand, and led her back to the car. Emily obediently followed him into the car, her eyes fixed on him without blinking. The more she looked, the more she felt that the man she liked was handsome.
Haven't seen enough?
Emily felt a bit embarrassed by his words and stopped staring so openly, though she still glanced at him from time to time. John suddenly felt a pang of nostalgia. He remembered asking Lily the same question before, though his tone had been impatient then. And how had Lily answered? She said, "I can never see enough. I want to look at you day and night."
John, the light is green.
Emily reached out and nudged the distracted man in the driver's seat. The cars behind had already honked several times. John snapped back to reality, started the car, and drove at a steady pace.
What were you thinking just now? You seemed lost in thought.
Nothing, just work stuff.
Emily didn't say anything more, though she clearly didn't believe him. He wasn't the type to get distracted by work while driving. So what could it be? And beside him, John felt a pang of guilt after answering. Since when had he started to hide things instinctively? The car drove back to John's house, a villa in the scenic mountains. No other woman had ever been here. As soon as Emily entered, she noticed there were no signs of another woman living there. Women's intuition is usually very accurate, and she felt a bit smug, thinking she was the first and would be the last woman to come here.
John, I've divorced. Will you?
She felt a bit embarrassed as she spoke, but seeing John patiently waiting, she took a deep breath and gathered her courage to say,
Will you still marry me? Will we get married?
The air instantly froze. He suddenly didn't know how to answer this question. Why was this happening? Hadn't he always wanted to marry her? When she married someone else, hadn't he been on the verge of madness, wanting to harm Michael? Why was he hesitating now? He looked into Emily's clear eyes filled with anticipation. Under such eager eyes, he finally nodded with difficulty and said,
Okay.
John walked out of the mountain villa with heavy steps. In fact, he rarely stayed here. He spent more time in that small apartment or at the hotel next to his company. Now, a woman had moved in, the woman he had loved for 4 years. Thinking of this, he felt a sense of relief, no longer so troubled. Emily ran barefoot, her heart aching more than her feet on the gravel.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? It's our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
John, never hanging up, knew Emily needed him. But he had to go. He pressed the gas pedal harder, feeling a slight irritation as he saw her chasing after him in the rearview mirror.
The car sped up, and Emily, in her state, couldn't catch up with him. A car approached, and the sudden sight of Emily startled the driver. The screeching brakes were followed by a spreading crimson stain on her white dress.
The assistant hesitated before leaving. Lily Tang knew he was afraid she would demand something, but she didn't want anything. What use would it be to her? The TV was broadcasting local news, announcing that a city's young entrepreneur John Fu was about to marry a woman with the surname Xiao. The news detailed their romantic journey of meeting and falling in love, making people sigh. The news made no mention of John Fu's previous fiancée, nor did it mention that Emily Xiao was Michael Song's ex-wife. It only spoke of the couple overcoming obstacles to finally be together. Lily Tang stared at the TV without blinking, not missing a single word.
Whispering, broken, so that's how it is. He's getting married, finally able to openly announce his relationship with Emily Xiao, so he doesn't need me anymore. He gave me money to make me leave, not even willing to see me one last time.
She suddenly found it all laughable. In his eyes, she was just a woman who could be dismissed with money. He had never been moved by her.
Angry, pathetic. How could I be so foolish to think that his keeping me captive was his awkward way of trying to win me back?
Her self-respect was shattered once again. She left the apartment, tearing up all the documents. She wouldn't take a penny from him. If she was going to leave, she would leave completely.
Determined, I can't bear to watch the man I love marry another woman. I won't stay in this city to humiliate myself.
But even though she had decided to leave completely, why was someone still not letting her go? As soon as she stepped out of the apartment, she felt a shadow approaching from behind. Her head was struck hard, and she fainted before she could even cry out in pain.
Terrified thought, it's over.
Not yet recovered from her heartbreak, she found herself in another perilous situation. Lily Tang woke up in pain from the jolting of the car. Her head was still dizzy, her eyes covered, her mouth gagged, and her hands and feet bound. She felt like she was stuffed into a sack.
Her clothes were still intact, and there were no signs of physical assault. She didn't know what these people wanted, so she continued to feign unconsciousness. The car kept driving, and Lily Tang had no idea where they were taking her. The fear of the unknown grew, making her increasingly desperate.
She didn't know the time or whether it was day or night, but she could feel the car had traveled far, possibly out of a city. She felt so hungry she was numb, her lips dry and cracked, extremely dehydrated.
The people never intended to give her food, confirming her suspicion that they wanted her gone. The car stopped, and this time it wouldn't move forward again. She was carried out, and from their conversation, she knew they planned to throw her into a lake.
Terrified thought, I can't even ask who wants me gone.
Before she was thrown into the icy water, the water engulfed her senses, and the fear of drowning overwhelmed her. It felt like she had fallen into a confined space, filled with endless terror.
The day was supposed to be perfect, but things took a different turn.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
Emily cried, her eyes red, chasing after John's tall figure. Her high heels had long been kicked off during the run, and the gravel on the ground hurt her feet, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart.
I have to go, Emily. This is important.
John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, but he had to go. As the car started, he saw a white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror, feeling a slight irritation. He pressed the gas pedal harder. The car sped up, and in her current state, she couldn't catch up with a person, let alone a speeding car. But she really didn't want him to leave.
Watch out.
A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of the white figure startled the driver, followed by the screeching sound of brakes. The white wedding dress quickly turned into a crimson flower.
The grand wedding venue was filled with the buzz of excited guests, but Emily Zhao's heart was in turmoil as she ran after John.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
She cried, her eyes red, chasing after John's tall figure. Her high heels had long been discarded during the run, and the gravel underfoot hurt her, but the pain in her heart was far greater. John never hung up the phone. He knew Emily needed him, but he had to go. As the car started, he saw Emily's white figure persistently chasing after him in the rearview mirror.
I'm sorry, Emily. I have to do this.
The car sped up, and Emily, in her current state, couldn't catch up with a speeding car. But she couldn't bear to see him leave.
A car approached on the road, and the sudden appearance of Emily startled the driver. The screeching sound of brakes echoed, and blood quickly spread around, staining her white wedding dress a deep crimson.
Emily's voice trembled as she called out to John.
Don't leave, John. How can you abandon me? Today is our wedding day. How can you leave because of a phone call?
Her eyes were red from crying as she chased after John's tall figure, her high heels discarded during the frantic run. The gravel hurt her feet, but the pain in her heart was far worse.
I have to go, Emily. This is important.
John never ended the call. He knew Emily needed him, but he had to go. As the car started, he saw her white figure persistently chasing him in the rearview mirror, a pang of irritation hitting him. He pressed the gas pedal harder.
Please, John. Don't leave me.
The car sped up, and she couldn't catch up. But she really didn't want him to leave. Suddenly, a car approached, and the driver, startled by Emily's sudden appearance, screeched to a halt. Blood quickly spread, staining her white wedding dress into a crimson flower.